Moving on, Senator Ahmedvar.
Thank you very much. I would first like to comment on this deck. I think either FATCO or the Energy, I'm not quite sure who handed this out, with statistics from the Rocky Mountain High Institute drug trafficking area. And just to restate once again, the evidence drawn from different sources tells you different things. I will cite the National Survey on Drug Use and Health in the United States, which is universally agreed to be the most authoritative source, and found that in Colorado, cannabis use monthly by age 12 to 17 has dropped from 9%, from 11% to 9%. So just sort of let you all know we're coping with a great degree of evidence and nothing seems to line up. So having said that, my question is to the people from industry and Mr. Yussuff. You already have practices and policies in place to ensure that when people get onto the airplane, get into the truck, get into the train, that they are not impaired. You already have these policies, and in spite of everything we may hear, I think we're fairly confident that we're in safe hands when we board a plane, outside of random situations. So I don't believe that substance abuse is going to go from zero in the workplace to an overload, because you already have policies and practices. So perhaps you could tell me, the people from FETCO first, if those policies and approaches work in keeping us safe. Let's not go to the legislative fixes you have proposed, but the current policies and practices, do they work? What are they? And Mr. Yussuff, from your point of view as well, do these current policies and practices work in keeping us safe?
So, yes, I don't want to sit here today and be perceived to be fear-mongering.
Yes.
Employers, as do our union friends, take workplace safety we take it very seriously. It's very important, and it is an issue on which employers have numerous policies in place. Most larger employers have policies as it relates to alcohol and drug. As it relates to the use of alcohol and drugs in the workplace. I would say a couple of concerns, and we've raised them already. One is there isn't really a clear understanding of what the rules are. I have to disagree with my friend. I don't think the Supreme Court really sorted this all out for us. So that's one issue. And the second issue is we do think that there is going to be a change in behavior. I think the government acknowledged this when it introduced Bill C-46. When the government introduced C-45, it brought in the companion bill of C-46 and greatly enhanced law enforcement officials' ability to manage impairment on the roadside. That has to be rooted in some assumption. I can only presume that assumption is that use is going to increase. So we need greater tools for our law enforcement officials to manage it. We think the same logic applies in the workplace.
We've got a fairly robust health and safety regime throughout this country, and unions and employer work very diligently. As a matter of fact, in a couple of days, April 28, we will be acknowledging, of course, that this is a national day which we take time to reflect on those who've been injured and killed on the job throughout this country. But the reality is I can say we've got a good regime, and certainly at the federal level, we work very hard to ensure the regime we have actually are effective and thus provide, of course, a safe workplace for both employees and workplace. I don't share the view, and again, I do have to say this with all due respect. I do not share the view that my colleagues on the employer side have been cheerleading on that people are going to increase and more importantly abuse their relationship in coming to work impaired because recreational cannabis will become legal. I don't share that view. I think yes, there'll be some of us will go out and probably if you haven't tried a joint yet, you may want to go out and find out whether it's actually what is talked about, and then at some point you realize, well, hey, I can go and have a drink equally as well as I can do and have a cannabis, and for some people it's other substances that they take. The reality is, I think we've got a good regime in this country. I think it's going to require, though, a continuing education of the workforce, and employer have an important role with that, as do unions and workers, as to ensure that nothing has changed. You cannot come to work in an impaired fashion and think that somehow, because this is now a legal substance, that's going to allow you to be there and to perform your duties. And I think in regard to what my friend has talked about, the legislation that will give enforcement officers in regard to people driving, you have to have probable cause to stop somebody and administer a test. And that's the fundamental difference in regard to the law. I mean, we don't give up our privacy rights and our constitutional rights because the government is going to make a legislation that's going to take criminal records from so many people who got it because they were just smoking a joint. I think we need to put it in some perspective. I do recognize we have to, and I would urge you as senators to recommend this in your deliberations, that the government should, of course, provide some provisions for the parties to heighten the education that's going to require for workplaces in the federal jurisdiction. And, of course, encourage the provincial counterpart and territorial counterpart to do the same thing.
No, sorry. I got to move on.